name is Rignal Joshua Lewis. I came here to the United States when I was 2 years old with my mother. My mother was trying to find a better life, live a better life. And we came over here and just trying to find something different, something new. Her escaping just some things that she dealt with for what I was told in Haiti. And when we got over here, like I said, I was young. I was 2 years old. My mother was raped, and when my mother got raped, she contracted the HIV virus. I was like 4 years old at the time. When that happened, back then, in the late 80s, early 90s, there wasn't really a cure for the virus. So her life was shortened within 4 years. My mother didn't really have, I think we had one family here in the States, but she didn't really rely on anybody here. She found a local church in a little town called Norwalk that she trusted. She told the church, listen, I'm getting ready to pass away. Can you take my son? The church took me in, and a beautiful family raised me. My mother passed away when I was 6 years old. I was raised by this couple for a few years, and I loved them, they loved me. And it was just, it was good for a period of time. When I turned 15 years old, I never forget, I was in high school, and my grandparents, that year, my grandparents passed away. So that was tough because both of them passed away in a car accident. And the next year, my parents got divorced. So the parents that I was used to, that raised me, now there's a separation. As a teen, as an adolescent kid, I had a lot of questions, had a lot of anger on the inside because I didn't understand why, if there was a God, why me? Why did I have to go through things that wasn't normal, that the average kid wasn't going through? Why couldn't I have my real mother? Why did God take my real mother from me? And those are questions that I had to ask, that I would ask God all the time. You took me from Haiti, you brought me over here, but it's not even a perfect life that I'm living. So I had a lot of hurt on the inside as a kid growing up because I wanted that love. I wanted that peace that I know I should have. And then on top of all of that, now here it is, the only parents that I knew was separated, they was divorced. So my early teen years, I lived a life of just anger. I wasn't a bad kid. I was raised in church, and I understood church. I understood the things of God, but at the age of 16, 17 years old, I think a lot of those emotions began to come out. I was doing things that had no business doing. I was running around in the streets, I was fighting, I was drinking, I was smoking, just doing a lot of things that wasn't pleasing to God. I knew of God, but I didn't have him in my heart. I didn't really know God. I just knew what I heard, from the preacher and from my parents. At age 18, I became a teenage father. And I had my first child. I wasn't really taught how to be a husband or how to be a real father. My dad growing up, he just was the kind of dad that just took care of the bills. You know, you do as he say. And that was it. There was never any, sit down talks or anything like that. So here I am now, I'm a father, and I just had to figure it out. I had to figure out life. I was confused. I left where I was at and I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. When I moved there, that life was really tough. It was a fast-paced life that I wasn't familiar with. So the things that I was doing in Little Connecticut, it enhanced. And I began to do a lot of things that, once again, wasn't pleasing to God. And I never forget one moment where I was going to a hotel party, and we got stopped by police. I was in the car with some of my friends, and I'll never forget, we got pulled over and I had a pistol underneath my seat. And one of my friends told the officer that, hey, there's a gun underneath the driver's seat. And I think it was at that moment where I felt like my whole life just slowed down. My other friends was upset. They wanted to retaliate. But I knew at this moment God was calling me for something, for a purpose. At that very moment, I didn't understand. I didn't even know what the purpose was. But it's hard for me to put it in words. I felt that this was the start of a new beginning. I ended up, God's grace and His mercy, I didn't do real jail time, but I did do 2.5 months sitting in county jail for different warrants that I had throughout the state of Georgia. And when I sat there, sitting in the cell, I would reminisce on what my life used to be like and think about what I wanted my life to be like. And I really didn't know. I was really at a roadblock in my life. I didn't have anyone. I didn't know who to talk to. And one person that always stood by my side was my wife to this day. I remember her calling or writing me a letter and said, hey, listen, my uncle is a pastor here in Florida. You should come to Florida, we'll be a family, but he'll help you. And I remember I was like, man, I ain't trying to do the church thing. And, but I knew it was something that I needed. So I ended up moving to Florida, and I was mentored by a great man of God. God rest his soul, Uncle Terry Argentin. I was mentored by him. He taught me how to pray. He didn't let me and my wife live together. He had me live with one of the deacons in the church. And but he taught me how to be a man, taught me how to read my Bible, and he also taught me how to dress. So I give a lot of credit to my Uncle Terry. It was at this time I was learning the Word of God. I was in church. He had me working with the young men in our ministry, at a small ministry. I began to mentor a group of young teenagers who we're still brothers to this day. And that's when I started to realize that this was my calling, to really be a change for the positive, for the good, right? To do God's work. And I got saved at an early age. I got saved, I believe I was about 22, 23 years old. And it was good. It was good. I was loving God. I was loving ministry. But now that I was doing all of this, there was another roadblock in my life. So now I want to get married. I want to build. I want to do a lot of things that society says, you know, a successful man should be doing. And when I went to go try and do some things, there was a roadblock. And that roadblock was that I wasn't a citizen of the United States. And that kind of confused me because I felt I went through the public school systems, graduated high school, you know, I've been in trouble a lot of times. I never was deported. And I didn't understand, now that I'm trying to do right, why there's roadblocks in my life. And I'll never forget, I went to one of the embassies in New York City. And I'll never forget, I went there and just trying to find out who I was, trying to find out my identity. And I'll never forget, the man looked back at me and he said, "Yeah, you don't exist." And that was a hard blow. That was a hard blow in that life. And it just talking about it just brings back so many memories, because I never forget, I remember just crumbling. It was almost like someone just snatched all the life, and I felt paralyzed. That was the first time I ever felt paralyzed. Throughout all the hurt, throughout all the pain that I experienced as a kid, I've never felt the way I felt at this moment. Because my reaction was, I'm standing right in front of you. How do I not exist? So I remember I went back home and I told my wife, I said, "Listen, I just feel like a failure." And my wife, being a praying woman, she said, "We're gonna be good, we're gonna be okay." And we literally did all the paperwork, everything that we could do to try to figure it out. Neither one of my parents, so what happened was, my parents, when they took me in, they never adopted me, which would have made the process a lot more easier. And they never did it. And I don't blame them for it. I believe God has a reason. He has things in our lives for us to learn on our own. Had I not went through what I went through, I wouldn't have known what perseverance is. I wouldn't have known what relying on God is, right? And a lot of times we rely on people, but I think it was through this period of my life where I was solely able to rely on Jesus Christ. And to make a long story short, everything worked out. Everything worked out. God was able to bless me with a great career. We ended up moving, my wife and I ended up moving back to Connecticut. And we joined our home church that we both grew up in. And we joined that church again. It was exciting. We were working with the young people, working with the youth, and everything was going good for about 15 years. My wife, myself, and my youngest son, we ended up moving to Texas. And how that happened was I was praying. I said, God, where do you want us to go? We're not at this church anymore. Where do you want us to go? He said, Texas. And that thing kind of threw me because I never had the desire to even visit Texas. Texas was never on my radar at all. Like I told, it was always North Carolina. I always wanted to move to North Carolina. I said, Texas, what in the world is in Texas? And so I told my wife, and my wife was just like, well, let's go visit. And when we came here to visit, it was the most peace, the most love that we've ever experienced. I couldn't even put it into words on how we felt, but we knew that we were home. We knew that this is where God has called us to, and where God really wanted us to be. And just a few months ago, the end of 2025, I felt the Lord speak to my spirit and said, I want you to minister. I want you to share the good news. And I got excited. Again, I got excited because I always loved talking about Christ. So I thought that God was gonna plant me in a ministry, and I was gonna be in the pulpit and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he spoke very quietly and said, no, you're gonna do it through social media. And that kind of shocked me because I wasn't on social media for over 10, 15 years. So I was one that I used to preach against social media. So I said, God, so I'm gonna give you a microphone that no man will be able to take. And the mindset of it was, okay, that's good, but how am I gonna do it? I was thinking about everything that I had and the things that I've went through. He said, I'll give you what to speak. I'll teach you and give you how to encourage people. I want you to motivate my people. And it wasn't that I was the first one. He was just using me to add to the fold, to be able to minister the gospel of Jesus Christ with my personality, with my style, however that may be. And I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful because I had that opportunity to talk about how God healed me, how when there was opposition in my life, I was able to overcome that opposition, how when there was roadblocks, I was able to break through those roadblocks, not through my own strength, but through the strength of Jesus Christ. And I've experienced hurt, I've experienced disappointment, I've experienced loss, but through it all, I've always experienced the love of Jesus Christ. And that's why I stand today as a young man Nothing up my sleeves, just someone who loves Christ and will do anything for him because he did everything for me.